Hello everyone, welcome to this video, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the plugins that I actually like. I thought that would be a good thing to do after my impromptu rant last night, basically disappointed in all the channel strip plugins I was trying. Made me very sad, but actually on reflection I do use a lot of plugins and I do like a lot of plugins, so I thought it best to talk about the ones that I do like and not be so negative on my channel. I got two amazing comments from people. Let me read them out now. Here's the first comment, which I actually pinned because I thought it was so accurate. It said it way better than I said it. So here we go. If people realised they had 5 of everything but with a different GUI, they would stop buying. Invest in Rat Gear or 500 series, something you can touch and own and sell on when you outgrow it. I relearned all the Cubase plugins and they make up the bulk of my mixes now, with some added outboard colour and a few select plugins. Saying that, Steinberg gives us a great set of tools. And I think this is one of the most honest comments of the whole lot, because it's right. There's so many plugins out there that basically are identical and they've just got a different skin on. And you're mixing with your eyes. That was a great comment, but I also love this comment, which is, tell me you don't know how to use plugins without telling me you don't know how to use plugins. Ooh, that was a burn. No, I don't mind at all. Yeah, it was a bit of a rant last night, so I want to rectify that today by going through some of the plugins I do actually like and actually use. Even when I'm mixing hybrid with all my stuff at home, my outboard stuff, I still use plugins to do certain things. So I've got them noted in my phone, and you'll have seen me use these in videos. So this isn't just a random list. You'll have seen me use them, so you know this is exactly what I use on things. So let's start with compressors, my favorite category of all. First up, the IK Multimedia Black 76. I have a load of 76 clones, the warm audio one, which I'm giving away in a mix competition. If you don't know about that, watch the video. But I also have a load of Black Lion Audio 76s. I'll tell you what, the IK Multimedia Black 76 is the only one that I will go to try and get the sound of my 76 clones, but inside the box. It's absolutely fantastic. In fact, the whole T-Rack 6 package is amazing. So you should go and get that, because it's if you're just looking for one set of plugins that are going to cover pretty much everything you need, the T-Rack 6 set is amazing. But particularly the Black 76 as a compressor, I love that. Also within the T-Rack 6 set, there's the Bus Comp, which is basically their take on the SSL sort of bus compressor, and that is fantastic. It just sounds really warm, it sounds really nice. I've used that on loads of mixes in loads of places, not just on buses. Sometimes I'll use it on a channel if it's the right thing to do, and it sounds fantastic. So there's the first two. I'm also a big fan of the Universal Audio LA2As and the LA2 plugins. There's 4 of them. I've looked at them in Plugin Doctor, and basically they're almost all the same with the exception of a little bit of saturation change on them, but they do sound really good. I love them on like a vocal bus to glue all the vocals together with the reverbs and the delays. They work great on guitars, great on bass. I don't find the Universal Audio ones particularly good on drums, and that will come to my most controversial plugin probably on this list that I like and I do use on a drum bus or on bass drum or snare drums or toms, you know, not the cymbally stuff so much, but on the weighty part of drums. And I really like the Waves CLA2A plugin. Please don't shoot me, but there's something about that plugin when you put it on a bass drum or you put it on a snare drum, or you put it on if you group all like the bass drum, the snare drum and the toms together and send them to a parallel bus, and you put the CLA2A on, it's just got so much punch. It's the most punchy sort of LA2A plugin. I don't think it sounds anything like a real LA2A, but there's just a punch to it which I find very pleasing, particularly on drums, and it kind of works on bass as well. I wouldn't use it on vocals or synth. It has some harsh, nasty top-end stuff due to not being oversampled, although you can fix that by oversampling it with another plugin. But yeah, that's really good. So the Universal Audio LA2As I'd use on vocals, guitars, acoustic guitar, things like that. And then the Waves CLA2A I'd use on things like drums and bass and stuff like that. The other Waves plugin that I do use quite a bit is their DPR 402. Now I actually have a real DPR 402 compressor, and obviously I've got the Waves plugin as well, and I A-B'd them. It's one of the first things I actually A-B'd when I was setting up my hybrid setup. I was like, oh, I love the sound of what that's doing on the overheads, particularly the overheads. I wonder whether the plugin sounds anything like it, and I put the plugin on and tweaked it, and it sounded absolutely identical. I did A/B tests between the two. I was blind testing and sort of clicking the buttons to see which was which, and I could not tell the difference in any kind of meaningful way. You know, the moment you take it out of your perfect mix setup and you put it on in the car, or you listen on headphones, or you put it on a normal hi-fi, there is absolutely no discernible difference whatsoever. So I do use the DPR 402 plugin because it's just easier than patching in the real thing, and I'm not getting any advantage from patching in the real thing, which means I might sell it, or, you know, I don't know. I'll probably keep it because I like it. I like the look of it. The lights on it are very nice, but there we go. Right, let's move on to gates. There's only really two gates that I use at the moment, and that's Sonable's Smart Gate. I use that on some bits and pieces. That's good. And Black Salt Audio's Silencer, which is an amazing drum gate, which is sort of fast becoming an industry standard for gating drums. So go and check those both out. They sound great. Let's move on to delays and reverbs. Okay, so delay-wise, I'm a massive fan of the IK Multimedia Delay Lab that came with T-Rack 6. I like plugins where you can just get to what you want really, really quickly, and I'm not having to dial in 100 parameters to get the sound. And literally put that on, turn up the doubler. There's a knob that's doubler, and that just adds some sort of modulation and sends the delay slightly out of time the more delays you get, and just turn up the doubler a bit, put it on, bit of high pass, bit of low pass, and it sounds fantastic. It's just one of those plugins that just works straight out of the box, and that's exactly what I want in a delay plugin. Before that, I used to use Waves H delay a lot, which I found equally as intuitive, and the sound on that was fantastic, but I didn't get that doubler option where it would throw the delay slightly out of time. The modulation in it was really good, and there were some other things in it that were nice. So it's not like I will never use the Waves H delay again. I'm sure I will at some point, but in my last 6 months or so of mixing, maybe a little bit shorter than that, but definitely the last few months of mixing, I've exclusively used the IK Multimedia Delay Lab, and I've never felt the need to reach for anything else. So that's a fantastic plugin that does come with the T-Rack 6 set. Let's do reverbs. Reverb wise, the Universal Audio Pure Plate is the best plate reverb that I've used on things I was recently mixing with for Ozzy Floyd, our Dark Side of the Moon from 2023, and I used the Pure Plate on lots of things on that, and it just sounded so old. You know, needed a little bit of EQ. I think it has a little bit too much bottom end for my liking. Even when you dial that out within the plugin, it's a bit too much bottom end, so I would EQ it on the channel, on whatever the send is for the reverb. I would EQ it afterwards, but wow, I don't know, it just sounds so smooth and sounds like a proper old plate to me, and I love that. From IK Multimedia, I love their Fame Studio reverb. I also love their Sunset Sound Studio reverb that are meant to simulate actual rooms, and they've also got plates in them that I have used and are really nice. So I love those. And if you want to get a really cheap sort of drum reverb that sounds like one of those kind of old Alesis MIDI verbs or microverbs or something from the 90s, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm saying they sound cheap and I'm almost laughing saying it, but there's a quality to that sound. There's a grittiness, particularly on drums, where it doesn't have to be that musical sounding. You know, there's a quality to having a certain cheap sounding reverb, and I find that the Waves Reverb is a great cheap sounding reverb that doesn't use a lot of processing power and just can sound really nice on like snare drum and toms and stuff like that. So if you don't want to go posh, Waves Reverb is great for that kind of stuff. Then we're going to come into the kind of the delay stroke reverb plugins, and this one is free, and if you don't go and download it for free, because it is free, and install it, then you are crazy. the Valhalla Supermassive is just one of the most interesting delay stroke reverb plugins that are out there. I tend to use it on vocals and sometimes on guitars, but mainly vocals. It's just one of the most interesting delay and reverb plugins out there. I can't even describe what it does. It's just like nothing else. It's the Valhalla Supermassive does sound like it's from another planet, and it's a really cool sound. I used it on a Melly song, Should Be Fine, and I've used it on a lot of really rock stuff as well, and it's just interesting. So go check that one out. Saturation wise, considering my last video I was moaning about the crap saturation in channel strips, but there are some good standalone saturator plugins that I wouldn't use on every channel because they take up far too much processing power. But the IK Multimedia Saturator X is my favorite of all the saturator plugins. Also, IK Multimedia's 73 EQ, which is meant to be the 1073 simulator. If you switch that into mic mode, it's got a great saturation built into it. So yeah, I mean, that's not specifically a saturator plugin, but it does do saturation really well. Probably better. I use that more for the saturation than I would for the EQ. So that's really good. Go and check that one out. Another one that I used to use quite a bit that I will still grab if I need a specific sound, and I find it works really well on guitars, particularly on guitars, is the Waves NLS. Now, I know the point of the Waves NLS, the non-linear summing plugin that does no summing, because obviously the DAW's doing the summing. The whole point is you put it across everything and it models different channel strips and has different EQs, but let's leave that aside. If I've got quite a sort of a punky guitar and I want it to have a certain bite and I need to work in the box, I can't whack it out to my SSL Bus Plus or something else, you know, then using Waves NLS and just bringing it to the point where it's crunching a bit too much and you can hear the distortion, and just back it off a tiny bit. I've got myself out of a hole many times with a punky guitar sound using the Waves NLS plugin, and although it's probably not fashionable to use it these days, there's a lot of other plugins out there that do things much better with oversampling. This Fab Filter Saturn, which I don't have, and many others. There's just something really simple about whacking that on, putting it up. If it gets me the result I want, then it's great. So you know, don't overlook some of these old plugins because they're very processor unintensive, and 9 times out of 10 they do just get the job done really quickly. Amp sim wise, anyone that's watched this channel knows that I'm a big fan of Amplitude 5, and I don't really use any other amp sims. Amplitude 5, the Max version 2, whatever I've got, it just has everything. It has all the pedals, has all the amps, and I don't really use much of it. Most of the time it's just like a Fender Twin or a Marshall. I might change the cab. Changing the cab on it seems to do more than anything else. Sometimes I'll use the Leslie simulator built into it, which is amazing. Yeah, it just kind of works. I try and turn all the reverbs off from that plugin, all the room simulators, because although they sound nice when you're playing the guitar on their own, they're fantastic. The moment you start stacking a load of guitars up that you've done with amp sims and you got all these reverbs and rooms and everything on, it all just becomes messy. So I tend to just turn all that off and then deal with that in the mix. You know, if I want it on one specific bit, that's great, but I'd rather start with the guitars dry and work from there. But yeah, Amplitude 5, massive fan of it. Sounds absolutely great. I've used it to record pretty much all the guitars that I've done on anything for about the last 3 years, you know, and I have then taken that signal, turned the speaker simulator off and fed it through a speaker just using a flat power amp, and then mic'd it, and sometimes that's worked and sometimes it hasn't really made any difference and it just sounded great from the plugin. So yeah, Amplitude 5 is my amp sim of choice. Right, what else have I got on here? EQ. Okay, Sonable Smart EQ 4. The Lazy Man's EQ. It's not that it will do it all for you, but it will get you to a place where you can then make tasteful artistic decisions rather than having to deal with problems. It's like having an assistant that just kind of prepares your session so everything sounds kind of on average pretty good, and then you can EQ and do creative things from there. Sometimes if I'm dealing with something and there's a lot of harshness, there's a lot of this, there's a lot of that, and it feels like it's a moving target, you know, the things that are harsh, if I EQ it out there, it will cause a problem somewhere else in the song. Using Smart EQ and just putting the adaptive thing up a little bit sounds fantastic and just saves loads of time. And I've spent enough of my career EQing things myself to not feel any kind of, I don't know, any kind of shame in using a plugin that just kind of does some of the work for me. You know, I'm quite lazy these days and I'm quite happy to have that done. So Sonable Smart EQ4 is fantastic. Also, Voxengo Curve EQ, which comes with Cubase, but you can get it as a standalone product. I think that is fantastic. It's really good for matching the EQs of things, you know, particularly if I've got a bit of outboard gear, that I can get the compression right, but I can't get the EQ right. There's something that with the transforms or whatever that's just changing the EQ. I can whack a load of pink noise through it and basically capture the curve of that pink noise with Curve EQ, and then I can then put it through the plugin and work out what the difference is, and I can model my outboard gear a lot better using Curve EQ. So yeah, I love that. The British channel, the IK Multimedia British channel, which is meant to be like an SSL type thing, and their EQ73, which I mentioned earlier for the saturation, but particularly the British channel, it's meant to be like an SSL EQ. I think that's amazing as an EQ if you want an accurate SSL style EQ. I've actually put it up against my 500 series E EQs, and it just is identical. I mean, it's literally, if you get it on Plugin Doctor and you get the same curve, and then you change the Q on the plugin and you change the Q on the real thing, they all just move and come to exactly the same place. So it is such an accurate clone of the SSL EQ. So I really like that. I absolutely recommend that. Built into Cubase is their frequency plugin. So unless you're using Cubase, you can't have that. But to be honest, with frequency, it's almost like you don't need anything else. It just does everything. It's dynamic EQ. It's got 8 different side chains for the 8 different bands. I mean, you can make a vocoder with it if you want. It's fantastic. So I absolutely love the frequency plugin built into Cubase. And finally on my list, I've got an old classic which takes up almost no processing power, and if you just want to high pass something, or you just want to add a bit of top end on something and do something really simple, the Waves Q1 stroke Q10, depending on the number of bands you want. But if you've got a Waves subscription or you bought a package years ago, it's just a clean digital EQ and it does what it says on the tin, and I've reached for that many times just for simplicity. So yeah, that's a good plugin, although I must say I don't find myself using it as much these days, because some of the things that I would have done with that are covered, can easily be done if I'm using, for example, Smart EQ or whatever. But I want to give it a shout out because I have used it so much in the past. Let's move on to noise reduction. The Waves Clarity VX is possibly the best thing to clean out crap from vocals. I really like that plugin, particularly live stuff as well, when there's kind of 6 mics, vocalists on stage, when I've done Ozzy Floyd mixes from multitrack, and there's 3 blokes across the front singing, 3 girls at the back singing, and all sorts of stuff bleeds through, and I will just by default run them through the Clarity VX plugin, clean them up a bit, not in real time. I'll be doing that offline so that when I'm mixing, that processing's already done, and it just means that I can use EQ and compression a little bit more without bringing up the background noise. So that's a fantastic plugin. Also, the Isotope RX series, I'm up to RX 9 I think, but there is RX 11 out. Their noise reduction tools are fantastic, so if you get the chance to check those out, if you need some noise reduction, they are things that I would definitely recommend. And finally, the things that I was having a go at my last video, channel strip plugins. So although I'm not happy with the way they're doing the saturation, actually there's a few of them that for an all-in-one solution for a bit of EQ, compression, blah blah blah, they're really good. Okay, so the first one I'm going to say is the IK Multimedia British channel. The EQ on it that I said matches the SSL perfectly. The compressor is perfectly functional, high and low pass, all that stuff, and it does sound really good. It just doesn't have any saturation in it. I mean, I look on Plugin Doctor and there's literally almost no saturation whatsoever, but obviously if you use it with another saturator plugin like their Saturator X or something else, then you're going to get that. The other one that I have used quite a bit is the CLA Mix Hub plugin by Waves. I find that pretty accurate in terms of like EQ for SSL. The compressor that's built in on it is quite usable, and I like the fact that you can view multiple instances of the plugin at once in the bucket view, so you can have all of your EQs up and just kind of tweak almost as like it was on a console. Again, it's not something I do so much nowadays because I'm doing more outside the box, but inside the box, that is a great solution. Waves get a lot of shit, but that particular plugin, and also their EV2 channel, but I prefer the Mix Hub because it's got an insert point in it, so you can put another plugin in there, and also the whole thing is oversampled. So if you wanted to use, for example, the CLA2A plugin, which isn't oversampled, you could load up the Mix Hub, turn all the bits of the Mix Hub off, and then put the CLA2A in the insert of the Mix Hub plugin, and it would instantly be oversampled, which is something I've done quite a few times. So yeah, they are my current plugin recommendations. I'm sure I've forgotten a few, and I'm sure I will do another list with some updates and that, but I thought I'd defend some plugins after slagging them off so vehemently last night. If you like this video, please share, please subscribe, please leave me a comment if you think there's a plugin I should check out. I had loads of people kind of going, oh, well, you know, you need to try this plugin, you need to try that plugin. My rant about not liking plugins, I don't know whether it should lead to me then buying more plugins, but we will see. I will check some of them out. I really do want to check out some of the Stephen Slate stuff, because that's something I've never done. I've never really used any of their stuff except Trigger 2. So yeah, that's something I will check out in the future. As ever, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave me a comment and share. See you in another video. Goodbye.